Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Pacifictech webinar today, highlighting our employee expense reporting as part of our AP automation suite. My name is Bill Fligg, and I'm our North America Sales Manager. We also have Jamie Steele with us, and he's our Business Development Manager. Here's a brief agenda for today's webinar. After this introduction segment, we will move on to the actual presentation and demo with Jamie. From there, I'll come back to go over a few other things, and then we will end up with a question session. Pacifictech is a global software development partner with over 20 years experience and commitment to Sage 300. With a suite of Sage 300 add-on modules, web-based connected services, mobile applications, and global private cloud hosting solutions, Pacifictech extends Sage 300 with Tier 1 capability. Pacifictech's AP Procure-to-Pay solutions take Sage 300 to a new level of functionality and capability. We have categorized our solutions into three groups. We have our workflow suite, which streamlines the process from procurement to payment, as well as providing a paperless document system. We have our control suite that gives visibility and auditing of personnel activity, including restricting certain activity without approvals. And we have our mobility suite, giving you browser and app-based connectivity to your Sage 300 for people that did not need to be logged into the back end for requisitions and approvals. I'm going to hand the screen over to Jamie now so he can walk you through our employee expense process. Over to you, Jamie.
All right, great. Thanks very much for that, Bill. Yeah, so this slide here is one that we show quite often because it just positions the three different workflow solutions that we've got. So we've got the procurement workflow solution. In the middle is supplier invoice workflow or payables workflow. And on the right-hand side is our workflow notifications module. So in terms of the expense report solution, that really falls under the payables workflow module. And then in terms of our AP automation solution, we did our previous webinar was on this topic, and so this has really been used for supplier invoice automation and approvals, but our expense report system falls into the same, utilizes a lot of these same components. So we'll be sort of going through that in this session. All right, so in terms of the expense report processing, what we find with talking with business partners and customers is that there's sort of two ways that the expense management is normally handled. So the first approach is when a company has credit cards or P cards or purchase cards that their staff use, and so they use those cards when they're purchasing their items, and then periodically, so normally at the end of the month, the company will get a list of all their credit card transactions. So that's one approach, and the other approach is where the employees are actually using their own credit card or paying for the items themselves, and then at the end of the month they submit an expense report to get reimbursed for those expenses. So we'll look at both of these two approaches during this webinar. And so I think, like we've touched on previously, yeah, so what we're doing is using our existing AP automation system. So we've just, I guess, tailored that or optimized that to handle the expense report processing. That really means it's sort of, easy for partners to learn and easy for customers to use. And so really what the solution allows you to do is capture your employee spend, and then they can attach all the receipts and the invoices that support the employee expenditure. And then that can have its own workflow. So what we find with a lot of companies, the employee expense reports is an area that is closely scrutinised, and quite often it will have more, or quite often it'll go to a senior person to check every expense report, just to make sure that all the expenses are legitimate. All right, so in terms of, if we look at the first of the two approaches, so in terms of a company credit card, so there's sort of four main steps in the process. The first one is when the AP person downloads the credit card data from their credit card company, and they bring that into Excel. They then add some extra information to that, and then they bring that information into the payables workflow system using our importer spreadsheet, or our importer program, I should say. So that then creates the transactions within the payables workflow system, and it routes them to the appropriate employees who are the credit card holders. The employees then, their step in the process is to attach any receipts to that expense report, and then also to put in more information about to describe what the expense is, and also to check the coding as well. Or yeah, the GL coding, that varies between different companies. Some companies want the credit card holder to do the GL coding, other companies want other finance to do that. Then once the employee has attached or carried out their processes, then they push their expense report along into the next step in the workflow, which is for the approval. And then once it's been approved, what we're finding most companies do is then have the expense report sent to the finance team, and well, either finance or AP, and they then check a couple of things. Normally just check the GL coding, and also check any tax settings to make sure the taxes have been claimed correctly. All right, so that's really the main steps in the process. So now we'll have a look at the software and we'll show it to you in action. So what we're looking at here is our Sage desktop. So if we come into our workflows and have a look at the workflow that we've got set up here. So this is our expense report workflow. So the first step is for AP to get the data in Excel and then push it into the workflow. And once it's in the workflow, then you can see the steps here, which are very similar to what I just explained on that PowerPoint slide. So the first step, it goes to the salesperson to do the coding and attach the receipts. Then once that's done, then that person pushes along and it'll go to their manager to be approved. And then what we've said in our workflow here, that every expense report needs to be approved by the CEO. So that's step 30. And then it goes to finance to check the coding. And then after that, then it gets pushed across to accounts payable. All right, so that's the workflow that we'll be pushing our transactions through. So the first step in the process when it's a company credit card is to get the data from the credit card company, and I think in most cases that can be provided in a format that can be brought into Excel. So what we've got here is just, I guess, a pretty simple example showing some data that has been formatted so that it can come into our, or be picked up by our importer program. So what you can see here, this is basically showing two different credit card holders. So this one here, which is this person, which is myself, has spent incurred 2 transactions on their credit card in the month of December. And then the second credit card holder is Bill Fligg, and so Bill has also incurred 2 transactions on his credit card in December. So just, yeah, so obviously the data that comes from the credit card company will have different columns to this. So what our clients are doing is just, some of them are, they just manually take the data and format it into this format, or other companies have got macros running within Excel that will do a lot of that, the data formatting for them. So yeah, just to go through some of these key fields. So, so what we're doing here is using a system to generate an invoice number. So, there's different ways that this can be done. Here we're just saying we're putting the year and then YYMMDD and then the credit card holder. So there's different ways that you can create the invoice number, which is not too overly critical. Then we've got the vendor ID, and again, there's different ways that you can use the vendor ID. Here we've got two separate vendors for the different card holders, but that you don't have to do it that way. But the key part is really the cost center code. So what this is, we've got a cost center set up for each person, and so what that means is that the expense report will get routed to that person by way of that cost center. Then over here we've got our line information. So this will have come through, from the credit card information from the credit card company. Now another interesting point is the GL account. So in this example, we've got the GL account has been coded or been put in here, but quite a lot of companies, the AP people are not aware of what the correct GL code is. So in that case, they just use the suspense account, and then the credit card holder will correct the coding of that. Right, so we'll just save that, and now we'll come into our importer program. And so this now picks up the Excel spreadsheet. And so we run this function here, which is import into the grid. So what that's doing is reading the data out of the Excel sheet and bringing it in here, but it's also doing quite a bit of validation during that process. So it's checking that the vendor ID is valid, the workflow and the cost center and the GL accounts are all valid. So that's all, and so that's this message here. If any of those are incorrect, then it will show up a message in this column. Right, so now if we're happy with that, we then click on the create invoices, and so that's now creating these transactions within the payables workflow system. So what we can do is come to our invoice entry screen, and if we come to the last two transactions, so here they are. So these are here's the one for this vendor. So that's Jamie Steele for the month of December, 2 lines, and then another invoice here for Bill Flake for the month of December. So now we'll just submit those into the workflow. And if we just go back to, workflow events, we can see who they've been routed to. So I've just got a next action set up called sales. So that's the salesperson. Right, so now this salesperson can get an email to say that their expense report has been loaded into the system and it's now ready for them to process it. And so they'll log in using PW Web. So they can obviously do this from anywhere where they've got internet access. And so we can see, so this person's, well, we've been putting through some other example transactions, so there's quite a few expense reports in there, but here is the one that we'll just work with now, is the second to last one. So here we can just sort of see the, I guess, the summary information. So what the credit card holder can do is click on the edit icon on the end. And so now they can see there's the 2 lines of the expenses for that month. So what a lot of customers do, the first step they'll do is go and attach the invoices. So if we come into the Workflow Documents tab, select Files to attach, and then we can navigate to where the files are located. And we can put in our description. And then we can go back to look at this next line, was PB Tech. So we can come and locate that receipt. All right, so now, so we've attached the 2 receipts for the 2 lines on the credit card. Now, the next step in the process is to check the GL coding and also to add a comment. So we click on Edit. So we can change the GL coding, so we can use distribution codes here as well. So these are just using the distribution codes straight from AP. So you can see those are set up to reflect normal expense report sort of lines like meals, office supplies, parking, travel. And we can also put in a comment so that we can have a bit more information in terms of what this expense was for. So we can say lunch with CFO of ABC Limited. And then if we come and edit the second line, we'll put in more of a comment there. All right, so now this person has now attached the receipts that they need to for their expenses and put on more of a comment and check the coding. So now they come back to the approval console and they can now mark it as, so they set it to approved. They can say, they can put in a comment if they want to. And then they postmark documents to move that along to the next step in the workflow. All right, so in terms of the workflow, this now needs to be approved by their manager, which is a person called Div Manager. So they will, I mean, emails can be sent at all of the steps through this process. And so here they can see all the different transactions they need to approve. And so they can see this one at the bottom here. So they can click on the hyperlink to open it up. They can check all the coding, or they might not be so interested in the coding, but they're more interested in the validity of the expense. So they can see the lunch and the mouse there, and then they can come and open up the receipts. All right, and so then they can do their approval. And push that along. And so with our workflow, we've that's now gone to the CEO. So if we'll just log out there. So now, yeah, the CEO will be logging in to do their approval. And so if they come into, you can see that under the approval console, we've got the 3 different options for the 3 workflow modules. So the one we're looking at is supplier invoices. We should actually rename that so it says invoices and expense reports. And so here's our one at the bottom. So again, the CEO can have a close look at that. Again, check that it looks okay, the lunch and the mouse. Then they can open up the receipts if they want to. So they're okay with that as well. And so now that's really the most of the approval steps carried out. So now it's gone to the finance people to just do their final check. So they'll normally do that in the desktop. So if we log in as control, and so they'll come into payables workflow, into the approval console, and there's the expense report there, credit card, Jamie Steele. So again, they can open that up. And so the finance people, what we find is they're normally wanting to, just make sure the coding is correct. So they'll review that, and also just making sure that the taxes are correct. So, in terms of for countries that have GST, to make sure that it is valid, to be able to claim the tax there. And if they want to make any changes, then they can just do that using the normal Sage functionality of changing it to taxes being excluded. All right, and yeah, again, obviously they can look at the receipts that are attached. So if we push that through, then we click process from there, and that's now pushed it over into accounts payable. So yeah, all the transactions just keep coming across from payables workflow into an AP batch, and so that just gets posted periodically. If we open that up and look at the last transaction, we'll see our one here, credit card expenses, JS December 2020, and there it is, the meals and the office supplies. So again, we can post that from there, which is just standard Sage 300. And then actually, let's just make a note of what those GL accounts were. 6500-100. Yeah, so now from a GL perspective, so this is again very much the same as our invoice approval or invoice automation in terms of the ability to view the information from the GL. So if we can see our transaction here. So if we're looking doing our GL inquiry and we want to know what was this transaction all about, then we can again drill back to the AP invoice, then back to the payables workflow transaction, Then we can see it's that line number 2. So we can come and look at the second attachment there. And so we can see what that expense was for. All right, so that's really the GL inquiry side of things. Yeah, so that's really pushing a transaction through the process. So what we're finding, a lot of clients are very happy using PW Web, and they're, so they're users that are doing their expense reports. So AP bring in the data from the credit card company, bring it into Payables workflow, that pushes it out to the credit card holders. They then come and do their work within PW Web. So that's the other side of it, though, is in terms of the mobile app. That's our PT Go or Pacifictech Go. So I'll just show you if I log into that. And so this is an app which runs on Apples and Androids, which you download from the stores. If I just go back a little bit. So here the person logs in, so it says they've got 4 AP invoices to deal with. And so here we can see that we've got these 4 credit cards, all for Bill Fligg. So if we open up, let's just look at this third one here. If we click on the arrow to open that up, that shows the lines that have been brought into the system by accounts payable. So something that we've added recently within our app is the ability to attach files off the phone. So by clicking on this button here, add workflow document, this will allow, it goes straight to the gallery on the phone and allows any photos of any receipts to be picked up and attached. Right, so that's that's a feature that we've added quite recently based on requests from different customers. Now, so the next feature that we're wanting to add in here is the ability to edit some of this line information. So at the moment within our app, you can attach receipts off the phone, but if you want to do any editing, then that's not something that we provide at the moment, but that's coming out in our next version. So what a lot of our customers are doing is they're using the app to review it or attach receipts, and if they're happy with it, they approve it from there just by clicking on this button. But if they want to make any changes, then they are then connecting into PW Web. So I guess we want to get our app so it can do the editing, because that'll be quite a big improvement. But a lot of companies seem to be quite happy with this sort of dual approach that I've just described. All right, so that was that side of it. So I think that's probably the key points that we need to cover. So, oh, actually, yes, so in terms of just, if we recap on some of the benefits, so really what we're finding, with the whole COVID situation in 2020 and 2021, this whole area of expense reports seems to be a very, I guess, hot issue, or, one that's causing people a lot of pain in terms of, it's a difficult process. So we're finding or getting a lot of interest in this whole area, and so, and we're getting, I guess, some very good feedback from companies that have implemented the system. So really what it lets you do is, just move to a paperless environment for bringing in the transactions and then having them pushed out to the credit card holders. They can attach the files and then push the transaction along to the next step in the process. And so, I guess the second point there is, what we're doing is utilising the same system for supplier invoices and for expense reports. So, there's the benefits of just a single system. And yeah, companies are just saying, like what we've shown you here, we think it's sort of a fairly simple solution, but that seems to be what a lot of clients are looking for. And also just by using PW Web, it means, you can have 50 users, carrying out these transactions through PW Web for each Sage land pack. So it's quite cost effective from that point of view. I guess just another area that we should just discuss as well is in terms of comparing our solution to Concur. So Concur is a very well-known product. I think it was probably the leader in this whole travel and expense area, for quite a few years. And so we've had a couple of customers in Australia last year where they've sort of evaluated Pacifictech Expense against Concur, or two of those that we're aware of. In both cases, they chose our solution. And I think really what it boils down to is just that whole 80-20 rule. So our solution provides 80% of the functionality for 20% of the price. So, Concur does, sounds like the functionality is very, very strong in it. And so that obviously does a lot more than what our solution does. But, the question is, what are the company's requirements, and do they need all of that functionality? All right, so I think that's about it from me. So Bill, should we hand it back to yourself?
Sure, great. Thanks, Jamie. So what makes Pacifictech different to many of the other Sage 300 solution providers? We develop our modules within the Sage 300 Software Development Kit, or SDK. This means our modules look and feel like the rest of Sage 300, and upgrading becomes seamless. All the data in our modules resides in the Sage 300 database, which eliminates syncing and alignment issues. All configuration is within Sage 300 for enhanced familiarity, the ability to plug and play, and integration with other Sage 300 settings. Example, using the AP vendor setting known as AppVend to determine default GL codes. Pacifictech offers a complete end-to-end procure-to-pay suite of modules and services taking care of the entire process within Sage 300. Let's just have a look at a few of our other modules. And you can see on the screen here, we have our payables workflow, which our expense report is part of. And it does a wide variety of things in the whole processing invoice from vendors. And we have our purchasing workflow, which is requisitioning and all through the workflow process. PW Web you saw and integrates and connects to payables workflow and purchasing workflow. Actually, it also, you saw it connects to workflow documents, and it also works with our workflow notifications, which you'll see on the next screen. Our vendor catalogs also works with our solutions here so that you can control your vendors, agreements, pricing, contract dates and such, so that you can lock that down a little better. And take a look at another screen here of our other modules. We have commitment accounting to have a bigger picture overview of what your accounting picture looks like from a control perspective. Funds availability is something that integrates also with our workflows, specifically purchasing workflows, so that you have the ability to make sure you're not requisitioning or approving any expenditures that are outside of your current budget for a particular cost center. Workflow notifications just mentioned, and that has to do with controlling and managing changes that may take place in some of the major areas inside of Sage 300 that you do not want changing, like in vendor master files, unless it's approved. Advanced stock take has to do with managing inventory. Audit logger is what some people refer to as Big Brother. It just documents all the changes and things that take place inside of Sage 300 so that if you need to have some sort of a compliance and control solution, you have the ability to go back and see who changed something somewhere in the system or who processed or posted. Internal issues also deals with inventory and products. Key communications has to do with advanced communication with vendors and customers, where you typically by default only get one contact, and we give you unlimited numbers of contacts, and we give you SMTP like an HTML process so that when your documents are going to be posted, you can send them out by email to any one of these contacts for any given cost centers or areas of your business that you want to segment into different groups of people. So from there, a little bit of a look at some of our customers that we have using our system currently, and names such as the Space Center Houston, Redpath Mining, Canadian Red Cross, Dallas Zoo. So this gives you a bit of an idea of who's using our products, and know that we have a good customer base around the world. So at this point, we'll be answering a few questions. And if you have questions, feel free to type them into the question pane now so we can respond to them. If we don't get to your question, we will be in touch with you after the webinar to answer them. Thank you. And I'll hand it over to you, Linda.
Thanks, Bill. That's great. We do have a couple of questions, so I would just go through a couple of them. The first one is it possible for a distribution set so that one can allocate an expense across multiple cost centers, i.e. more than one department, or does it have to be entered manually line by line?
Yeah, so with our payables workflow, it fully supports distribution sets. So yeah, and actually that's a good point, because what a lot of Sage 300 customers find is they sort of haven't, well, quite a lot of them haven't been using distribution sets that much, but when they implement our solution, we've heard a lot of them say that the distribution sets really helps, cuts down a lot of data entry. So yeah, that's a key part of the solution. Yep.
Great, thank you, Jamie. Is there a limit to the number of receipts I can upload to a credit card statement? For example, are there 10 transactions? If there are 10 transactions, but I only want to show one receipt plus a picture, can there be 20 uploads to accommodate that?
Yes, so there's no limit on the number of files that can be attached to an expense report. So each individual file can be limited to a maximum size, like a lot of companies say 5 megabytes or 10 megabytes, but in terms of the number of attachments, there's no limit to that.
Great, thank you. Next question is, can I log in and review any history on receipts and get a copy of the records if they are needed later?
Yep. So I think I just showed quickly the ability to drill down from the general ledger, but there is also the ability to drill down from the, I guess, the vendor side of things. So if you have, whether you have each person set up as a separate vendor or not, either way, the transactions will be sitting under a vendor, and from that vendor you can drill back and look at the receipts. And so they're kept there for as long as you want, and that can be, 10 years or more. So yeah, so that audit trails there indefinitely.
All in the Sage 300 database, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Cool.
In terms of, I guess, one other thing, we have put together a document that just sort of explains some of these key steps and some of the different, some of the answers to some of these questions. So we're just, I guess, updating that document. It also sort of lists out some of the different approaches that different companies are using on some of the key fields. You know, you can do it one or sort of 2 or 3 different ways. So that's our white paper document. So we'll be getting a new version of that finished within, I'd say, by next week, the end of next week. So if any of you are interested, we could share that with you.
Yep, I can do that with pleasure as well myself. Last question that I have, how does the system handle multiple receipts that are not on people's credit cards?
Multiple receipts. Oh, so in terms of just individual, so that's where it's on their own credit cards, is it, or other transactions? Yep. Oh, right. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, there is the ability within PW Web for a person to initiate a transaction. If we just
they would submit a requisition, I think, right, Jamie, and that would basically work like that.
Well, they can actually create an expense report transaction. So yeah, very similar to a requisition bill. Well, in fact, as quite a lot of companies do use the whole requisition side of things, but we've done some more development in PW Web. We shall show that to you in a minute. So under transactions here, so what Bill was talking about was requisitions. We can also do PO receipts and some other transactions, but we've added a new transaction here called PAP invoice, and this is, I guess again we've got some more development that's in the pipeline to just improve this, but basically some companies are using this as a way to initiate an expense transaction, so they can pick the vendor, which is themselves. And then the workflow, which is expense report, and basically enter the transaction, attach the receipt, and push that through like that. So yeah, we haven't quite got this area set up very well from a demo point of view, but we could sort of do a presentation to any of you if you want, or probably do another recording in the next few weeks around this area. But that lets you attach a receipt as well.
I think they get the idea that at least if there is something outside of a credit card here, you just go to the back. You go to this PW Web and just enter the transaction. The idea that what the AP is doing for them with the credit card is saving them some time by uploading all that data.
That's right.
But they can go in here and enter it themselves if they had something outside of a credit card.
Yep.
Great, and that are all the questions that we have from our side. If you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact us. We're happy to take them on board and get back to you at any time. These are the contact details, and if you would like a recording of the webinar, once again, I'll be happy to pop that through to you, so please just let me know.